the network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
This is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
This is an AVNation special, The Sounds of In the Dark. It's Tim Albright with an AVNation special. What we're doing is we're talking with the sound designer, engineers, and supervisors for the CW program In the Dark. If you're not familiar with In the Dark airs actually broadcast on CW every Thursday. Interesting story. It's a seeing impaired, blind 20-something. Her name's Murphy, and she is trying to find out who murdered her friend Tyson. With me today to talk about kind of the sound design and how we create the world of a seeing impaired person is Mike McCone, Shaughnessy Hare, and Elliot Thompson from King Soundworks. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Elliot, we'll start with you on this.
Right.
When somebody brings a concept like this, and we've talked with a bunch of folks from King Soundworks before, you talented folks that create all kinds of really great audio and experiences. No, seriously, we've talked with you guys about Cosmos and about Jumanji and a number of others. Somebody brings this to you and they say, you know what, here's the pitch, Elliot. The girl can't see, right? So immediately there are those of us who have grown up in watching movies and grown up with comic books. You're immediately drawn to other famous seeing impaired people, and they tend to heighten the effects when it comes to audio, when it comes to other obviously senses. So when they bring this to you and they say, you know what, Elliot, this is the deal. We need to start enhancing some of the other aspects of the character, including what she hears and experiences. How do you do that? How do you walk through that script and go, okay, here's an area where we can enhance?
Well, that's a good question. I know that was my first impression of when I found out about this show, is that, probably going to have to enhance certain aspects of other senses. Obviously, we're in audio, so the sound aspect. But Mike actually might be able to speak better on this, but I think that they were trying not to fall into that sort of cliche. I think they wanted just more realism, especially, because Mike, do you want to take over? Because I know with the effects, it wasn't quite the case with that. Do you remember what Corinne had spoken to you about?
Yeah. So, I do remember ramping up for this, and there's actually, it's in one of the first few episodes of the first sound. Murphy actually comes out and she kind of does a gag where she pretends to have super hearing and then says, no, that's complete BS. Blind people can't hear any better than a normal person. So, more than anything with a show like this, and with the tone of it, which is pretty gritty and pretty real, we really wanted to make the sound be character driven and not necessarily high concept. Okay. So, especially when the show specifically calls out blind people don't have super hearing. What we're really doing is following the character's emotions more than anything. So, what that really meant to us when we were building the Murphy's world was not so much like Elliot said, the cliche of the enhanced sounds, certain things being super loud, like she can hear a pin drop. It's building depth into the world. So what we do a lot of the times is when we're in the interiors, we bring the outside into the world, so that when we're in her apartment, it's not just, maybe the air conditioning or the room tone in her apartment. We're hearing cars pass by. We're hearing the L train. The show's set in Chicago, so really distinctive Chicago sound, the L train. And things like that. We really want to make sure that wherever she is, that there are things happening in the world around her that we, like a person who might be seeing impaired, if we're not paying attention to them, we might not even notice them. But if we take the time to really listen to the track, you can hear all this depth and all this detail in her world.
Mike, let's take a little step back here and take a look at Chicago for a second. I'm in Illinois, well, in Southwest Illinois, just outside of St. Louis, and we've all kind of traveled a bit. Obviously, not right now, but when we were all traveling, Chicago is obviously kind of a second city for us here in St. Louis, and it has a distinct sound. The L specifically has a distinct sound. When you get a project like this and you get something that is so unique, I'm reminded of, that the trolleys of San Francisco would be another one that's so unique. How do you recreate that? Or is it something where you just simply jump on a plane with your team and go, we're just simply going to capture it as it happens?
That's something that's actually a really interesting question right now, as opposed to if you had asked me that when I started 10 or 15 years ago, where it would have been much more jump on a plane or get in touch with somebody that I know in Chicago. There's so many commercial libraries available now with recordists working in different cities that finding pre-recorded Chicago sounds and then using our really super expensive library that we have at King Soundworks, we really didn't have to do a lot of custom recordings for Chicago specifically. But I did spend a couple of weeks prepping for the show, really going through the existing stuff that we had in the available commercial libraries and looking for things that would give that distinct flavor. I grew up in the Midwest as well. I grew up in Iowa. So have definitely spent, Chicago's not my second city, that'd be Minneapolis, but I've spent a fair amount of time there and kind of understand the flavor of what I was looking for when I was doing Chicago. It's a little bit challenging at times. The show is not shot in Chicago, so you definitely we're faking it with some of the insert shots and the lots of interiors. But it was a really interesting challenge. It was fun to spend some time just listening to the soundscape of Chicago and seeing what felt true to me.
As someone who spent the best part of his college career listening through some of those sound libraries, I can only imagine how many weeks you spent going through those. Do you have a preference? I mean, do you have if you had your druthers, right? And we're outside of this crisis that we're all in now, and you know what? Instead of spending 2 weeks going through a library, you can just as easily, both from a time management standpoint as well as a cost standpoint, because your time costs money. Would you prefer to use the library, or would you prefer to record something live and custom?
You always love to have custom stuff. There's something intensely personal about using effects that you recorded yourself. You know them better. You know where they came from. There's a little story about all of them, and I use a ton of custom effects in the show. Don't get me wrong. The L Train specifically we didn't record, but I have a ton of recordings that we did use in this show. One of the coolest things to me about working on this season of In the Dark, season 2 specifically, is it's all set in the winter. Very unusual for a broadcast TV show to have such a strong sense of a winter season in it. And winter in the Midwest sounds completely unique to me, especially now having lived out in California for a long time. The birds are all different. The way the traffic sounds is completely different when all the leaves are off the trees and you get that cold air and the sounds of cars just travel forever and ever. And there are lots of opportunities we had in this season of the show to use those types of sounds to really sell that desolate Midwestern winter. And those are all custom recordings, and I absolutely love using those. There's a third way that I've used other than what you described of either going and recording myself or using library. And I've actually sent recorders out to family members that live in different parts of the Midwest if I'm in a pinch and I need stuff. So a lot of these pocket recorders, they're easy enough for anybody to use. So, send a recorder out to mom and dad for a month and just have them shoot what they, my dad's did a little bit of cross-country skiing and biking. So he'd go out in the winter to the nature preserves and record winter birds early in the morning or late in the evening. I love that stuff, man. It's really great. And it's a perspective that even if I had gone back, I wouldn't have gotten, because I'm not going to bike 5.5 miles out into the nature preserves at 5:30 in the morning, but my dad was doing it anyway.
No, absolutely not. No, God love your dad.
Yeah.
Shaughnessy, let's bring you in this because something Mike said, and that's that sounds different. Sounds are different when it comes to the different times of year. Yeah, and the Midwest is especially true. We just the cold, right? And I'm going to pick on the Midwest. When the weather gets colder and when the atmosphere gets thinner, sound is different. And so, how do you tackle that from a dialogue standpoint? When somebody's outside, that is going to be different if they're talking on the corner of LaSalle in the summer than when they are in the winter.
Well, that's a very interesting point that you brought up. See, something Mike and I discussed early on when doing the show was exactly this fact that in the winter, it sounds different because the world is different, meaning there's less tree or leaves on the trees, right? Traffic sounds different. Engines sound different in the cold than they do when they're warm. So we really spent a lot of time thinking about what's different. The reflections in the world are different. Sound isn't bouncing the way it bounces in the winter that it does in the summer. So when it came to working the dialogue, Elliot and I made sure we got it nice and clean, tried to take as much, junk out of the tracks, especially when they're out on they shot practically in a lot of places. So they were out on the city streets. We didn't shoot a lot of ADR for this show, so the majority of it is actually production. I'd say 98% of it. So we made sure to get that stuff really clean so Mike could play his effects in a way where we started using reverbs and things of that nature to sort of make the world reflect a little differently. And I did the same with the dialogue. So when it came to using exterior reverbs on voices and things, Mike and I would talk and say, hey, what kind of reflection are you using? Oh, I'm going to use a short slap in this alleyway, and it'll help reflect, the same way the dog bark does that you have there, or, whatever else is going on. So very much spent a lot of time talking about how things sound different in the winter than they do in the summer. And if you think about it, because of temperature change, it's all physics, right? So sound travels faster when it's heated outside. When the air is thinner, waves travel differently. So at the end of the day, we're just dealing with physics, and we're trying to replicate a world that we're all familiar with, but might not necessarily pay attention to. If you go outside your house in the winter and clap your hands, you're going to hear it reflect off the other houses in your neighborhood. And if you record that and then you go out in, say, the summer and do the same thing when the foliage is full and, you're going to, again, it's going to sound different even if you're at the same time, same place, doing the same action. So we spent quite a bit of time talking about that and how to get that to come through in the track.
Well, and Elliot, kind of wrap this whole thing around for me here. Shaughnessy talked about, the different effects and stuff like that of whether you're in an alleyway or you're in the middle of the street, and how those when you're in those environments, yes, physics plays an effect here. But you're in a studio. You're in a studio. So how do you learn that? Right? Is it something where you just kind of go out and you learn through experience, or is there some sort of mathematical calculation that we can do to say, what, if two parallel walls are here and they're made of brick, this is the reverb?
Yeah, I mean, there is quite a large bag of tricks that I would say that we as sound designers have. And it's, boy, I think Shaughnessy would agree with me. I wish it was just the same one every time, but it's usually a matter of trial and error. I know, obviously there's an abundance of reverbs to choose from just to start with that. But then, they may not quite match. And then you realize, well, maybe I have to use a certain type of delay and, the various plugins and whatnot. And then sometimes it's a matter of EQ, of just the way if you take some of the low end off the voice, suddenly it reflects in a different way. Sometimes you have to compress it in a different way. It's quite, I find that kind of, I know it could be maddening, but it's kind of fun too, because once if it was easy every time, maybe more people could do it. I don't know, but it's when you have to do all that trial error and then you finally get it, it's pretty rewarding. And it's, in my experience, it's usually not the same thing every time, but if you do it enough, you'll think, all right, well, I tried the EQ, I tried the reverb, I tried the delay. You know, maybe it's just the way we do the volume automation. So, you know, we spike the volume up and down really quick, you know, or it's just something like that. And then suddenly it works. And then you think, oh, I'll have to remember that for next time. And then that's, I mean, would you agree, Shaughnessy? I think that's.
Oh, absolutely. It's not a one size fits all, and it never is. You know, you can get into a scene and go, okay, well, I'm out here in the street, so I'm going to pick my favorite street reflection, and this is what I like to start with. And then once you put it in there against the effects, and the traffic starts chewing it up, or the music comes over the top, and suddenly it's either gone or it's washy. So you go, well, I'll just add more. Then suddenly they sound like they're down a 50-foot hallway, or, you know, 1,000 feet away. You go, oh, that doesn't work at all. I can't do that. So yeah, it's always a process. Everyone starts with their bag of tricks, and the longer you do this, the bigger your bag gets. So you lean into what you know and what sounds natural, and then you start working it from there. So yeah, unfortunately, it's not like every time I get to the alleyway, this is the verb. Every time I get in the apartment, this is the verb. You know, like we said, voices change in terms of temperatures in rooms and how weighty they are, how boomy they are, how sibilant they are if they're on a radio versus if they're on a boom. You know, all those things hit verbs differently. They sound different in rooms, time of day, where the boom operator had the boom at that particular point or didn't have it. So it's just a matter of, you know, what sounds right. And that's back to the whole, you got to trust your ears, right? You can't just go, well, you know, I get in this room and this is what I do. And, you know, well, it sounds kind of weird, but I'm just going to leave it because that's what I do. Well, that's never right. And sometimes the right answer is no verb. Maybe there's enough on there already. Maybe it's roomy enough. Maybe you have to take a lav and a boom and put them together and mix and match and just use the natural room that's on the production boom track, you know. So you just have to trust your ears, which is sort of, he'll sound cliche, but you know, a lot of young guys get into the business and they're so hung up on, oh, I have this gear and I've got this board and I've got this amount of plugins and this and this and this, and then you listen to the track and you go, you didn't listen to the track. All that stuff, those are just the tools. Your ears are what's going to tell the truth. So if it sounds good, it is good. Don't worry so much about the tools. Worry more about what your final sound is, you know. So there's a lot of exploration as you go. And as you do it more, you get faster at it. And you can immediately sort of hear, mixing dialogue long enough, you can hear the frequencies that you want to add or subtract right off the bat. If you go from the top of a show and play the first scene, and then you go, say, somewhere around 30, 40 minutes, and you play a scene and you flip back to back, you can go, oh my goodness, those sound so different. What happened? Then as you play the show in a run, there's a transition through the show where you don't notice those kind of things. It sounds natural as you go. So, and those are all those thousands of decisions you make as you go through the show. So, at the risk of sounding cliche, you know, it's sort of you just use your ears, you know.
Well, no, and that natural sound is the ultimate goal, right? You don't want to notice it, right? It just needs to.
Right, we're faking reality, right? So if we can trick our viewers into thinking they're there with the characters and invest it emotionally, then we win. That's all we're trying to do, is help tell this story. And being transparent at the same time. You know, if you notice the dialogue's getting bad, or you notice a door close is cartoony sounding, that takes you right out of it. Yeah. You know, and you know, maybe some people don't, but as sounders, definitely, we're always listening to tracks with our super hearing.
That is an occupational hazard. Just so you know. All right, guys, as we kind of wrap up here, Mike McClellan, that was Shaughnessy here, as well as Elliot Thompson, all from King Soundworks. There's a lot of parts and pieces to which I don't think sometimes people understand. We're talking with three gentlemen that helped put this show together. and it's almost like a kitchen, right? A kitchen at a restaurant, where you've got this chef over here making this part, this chef over here making this part, but then you got a head chef. Who's the head chef?
I guess.
Corinne,
Well,
the showrunner.
yeah. I mean, honestly, yeah. That's the real answer.
It'll be Corinne.
The showrunner, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
Well, I mean, I like every for every episode, I would sit with Corinne and the producers and the editor, and we would watch the episode, and she would say, I want this to sound like this, I want this to sound like this. You know, she's very in tune to what she wants the sound, what she wants it to sound like, just how she wants it to look and everything. And so we take, you know, sort of her overall menu of what she's decided she wants the show to sound like, and we try to create that.
Okay.
So I guess if that makes sense.
No, it makes complete sense. Yeah, that's it. You've got the overarching, you know, the show's producer and the directors that are kind of, you know, saying this is the direction, right? This is the flavors that we want, whether that's audio wise or video wise.
Yeah, and it's ultimately down to her what gets served. If I'm just going to keep this metaphor rolling.
I love that. I love that metaphor. Absolutely. All right, the show is called Go ahead.
Oh, I actually heard another group of sound guys talking about this, especially during this pandemic period, where a lot of times we were mixing and playing back for Corinne remotely. There are showrunners and producers who are process oriented, who really need to be in the room and see how you're doing what you're doing to make a decision about whether they like what you're doing or what they don't, and feel like they really had a hand in the process. And there are product oriented producers and directors, people who really, they'll step back, they'll take a listen to what has been presented to them, and then pick out what's working and what's not working. And we were blessed on the show to have a really product oriented production crew, people who really let us do our thing, and then came in and gave us great notes on how they felt like we were representing the emotional tone of the show, or what needed to happen pace-wise at any given time, and helped us adjust it at the end. So that was a really great experience for us.
That's awesome. All right, guys. Thank you all so much. Again, this is, it's called In the Dark. It takes place on CW every Thursday. Mike McCone, Shaughnessy Hare, and Elliot Thompson from King Soundwatch. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
All right, guys. For AVNation, go by our website, avnation.tv. That's avnation.tv. Find programs like this and a host of others. Also, while you're there, check out our 2 weekly programs, AV Week and Resi Week. Happens every Monday and Wednesday. All that and more at avnation.tv. That's avnation.tv.